have an interesting show because we have an interesting fella, all right? Dominick Izzo, retired police officer, 16-year veteran, also radio show host, former QAnon guy, and a lot of other things. So we're going to talk about what he believes about police bias, Black Lives Matter, and if we get to it, we'll throw in reparations for good measure, since he likes to go on rants about why reparations is not a good thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Dominick Izzo.
Doc, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well, brother. Let me say this, man. So obviously I've looked at some of your past rants and some of the statements that you've made. And amazingly, I actually agreed with one thing you said. And you have this capability to say very smart things in a sentence where you also say something very dumb, in my estimation. So let me bring that to the forefront. You said that there's systemic bias and racism inside of the criminal justice system. The emphasis should be placed on judges and prosecutors and deal makers and prisons, which you and I completely 100% agree with that assessment. But then in that same dialogue, in that interview, you created a caveat for law enforcement to say that somehow they're not included in that systemic bias against people of color, and they should not be treated the same because they are simply enforcing the laws. I want you to unpack that, and we'll get into it.
No, I don't believe my exact words were that they shouldn't be treated the same. There's always got to be accountability, 100%. I do want to start at the top up at the top and say that if people really did dissect and look into areas like Chicago, Cook County, Illinois, that's where I'm from, we do have systemic racism. I don't care who says what, it's in the jail. You've got a jail that houses 10,000 men and women, and we have a majority of Black men and women in there. Why? And I broke it down the last time, which was it's a profit system. You know, I truly do believe. And now remember, anytime I talk, I'm going to put an idealistic point of view out there first, and then I try to sit there and support, with time being permitted, my reasons behind I'm saying that. But I mean, I do believe certain things are stupid. Like, I'm not a fan of the war on drugs. In the beginning of my career, oh my gosh, demonized drugs like crazy, and I'm sure I ruined countless lives by arresting people that had weed in their pocket, right? You have things like that. And the connection between law enforcement and the courts is, well, here we have the laws in the books, and we'll take cannabis for a second. Cannabis, it's illegal. And again, I'm dating myself because I believe in 2017 or 2018 in Illinois, you know, they changed the legality of it. But back then when I was doing it, you had the easiest reason to arrest a Black man or woman, right? It's a victimless crime as far as I'm concerned. Somebody wants to smoke a joint and get high, I don't care. That's perfectly on them. But it was a great reason to find your probable cause to stop somebody. You know, easy arrest. If you're in a municipality where you've got a village ordinance law, well, then you got a $75 to $125 ticket. So you're taxing them right there on the street. You know, you give me your money, or you're throwing them in prison or jail, excuse me, because it's not prison, for 2 weeks before their court date. So I think that the way that law enforcement is the cop goes into the academy, and yes, there is a lot of demonizing of the Black community through the laws that they are enforcing. That's how I think that the police.
Let me opine on that point. Not just through the laws, because what you just described is also a level of discretion. Remember, these laws are enforceable, or they are non-enforceable, or you have what's called prosecutorial discretion. Now, a lot of people think, Dominick, that prosecutorial discretion starts with the prosecutor. No. Prosecutorial discretion starts with the responding officer. And that responding officer has the discretion to say, we want to enforce these minor laws. We want to enforce this victimless crime or not. And let me read some statistics, brother, and I'm going to have you respond to it, because the only issue I had with your previous statement from an interview that you did was the fact that you provided some protection for members of law enforcement. You did talk about the sheriff's office. You talked about the prison industrial complex without saying it that way. But how did they get to the prison, brother? What's the first response? What's the first interaction?
That's the statistics, Doc, I don't want to interrupt you, but your statistics, I'm not going to argue your statistics, but here's the deal. This is what you do have to remember too. Now, those cops have discretion, right? But this is where I blame the public, because the public likes to sit there and elect a mayor. The mayor appoints a police chief. You got your department policies that are written, and that has to be upheld by the cops. What about your department performance evaluations? What about your quotas? No one in their village.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. So, Izzo, let me go ahead and get into some of the stats. October 19th. So I'm going to start with a recent stat. Los Angeles Times found that during traffic stops, 24% of black drivers and passengers were searched compared to 16% of Latinos, 5% of whites. That same study, Izzo, found that police were slightly more likely to find drugs, weapons, and other contraband on whites that were stopped, not on blacks or Latinos. Also, Cincinnati, 2019, another study found that black motorists were 30% more likely to be pulled over than a white motorist. Black motorists also comprised of 76% of the arrests. Of the arrests following the traffic stops, despite making only 43% of the city's population. Let me go to your neck of the woods, Chicago. In 2016, the Police Accountability Task Force reported that in Chicago, black and Hispanic drivers were searched approximately 4 times more often than white drivers. Yet, in the Chicago Police Department's own numbers in their self-evaluation, their data found that contraband was more likely to be found, twice as likely to be found on white drivers, even though their systems or their methods did not reflect the reality of criminality in those stops. They still decided to target more blacks than whites. That's in your backyard. My question to you is, do you not find it legitimate that systemic racism and prejudice also exist in law enforcement, the responding officer, members who were part of your previous profession?
No, because I know no one wants to talk about the concept of culture and behavior, culture and crime, right? So all those traffic stops that you wind up reading statistics on, why is no one talking about, you got it on paper, but what was the stop like? I'm going to tell you flat out, what was the reasonable suspicion that the police officer had to ask, do you mind if I search the vehicle? And then how often? It's not like a cop can arbitrarily search a car. You have to have probable cause. You can ask anytime you want, but do those statistics say whether or not that the blacks and the Hispanics versus the whites gave the cops consent to search the car versus the whites?
So let me get this right, Izzo. You're saying that there's systemic racism and prejudice in every other level of criminal justice, the courts, the prosecutor, the jails, but there's no systemic racism codified in those who actually are administrators of justice as law enforcement agents. That's what you're saying?
I never got that far because you never.
Okay, but you do agree that systemic racism exists in all of these other forms of criminal justice systems, right?
I said that last time, 100%, and I'm going to continue.
Okay, but you don't believe it exists with cops?
No, I actually believe that behavior, what the cops are going to see, what you don't see in a report, actually dictates about 90% of what they're doing, which affords.
Well, where do you get that from?
Which affords people, because I did the job for almost 2 decades.
Okay, you did the job in Chicago. Did you ever target someone because they were black?
Did I ever? No, why would I?
Okay, did you ever notice a cop that you work with call any black person the N-word or target people because they were black?
Nope.
Okay, according to Chicago's own report in 2016, cops in Chicago were doing that.
Okay. You got to let me finish on these statements. I mean, I appreciate all the passion. There's a problem in law enforcement. There is, and it all boils down to what they're able to enforce. One of my biggest standings is if you want to fix the relationship between the police and the public, you go back to the Constitution. I keep talking about those.
Wait a minute, come on, brother. Go back to the Constitution.
Doc, you got to keep interrupting me, man. I'm going to lose.
Man, okay. Tell me where in the Constitution. We only got 20 minutes.
If you want people to start living and not being raped by the police and the public and the courts for all this money, then go back to the Constitution. Stop arresting for some of these victimless crimes. That's my first concept on that.
But see, we agree on that.
We're off to a good start so far.
but we disagree that somehow police officers are not also subject to the same systemic biases and racism as any other level of law enforcement.
It sounds like for everybody's need who wants to crucify the cops without looking at it.
No, crucify bad cops, brother.
Of course cops. And if you notice, if you've ever seen my content, you'll know that I'm one of the ones who's chastising law enforcement for crucifying bad cops. The point being is, you're looking at what are you giving the police the authority to do? So that's what you have to look at. When I go back to the Constitution, when you start taking away Terry stop and frisk stuff, you're going to see a decrease in police interactions. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that you give the police officers the authority to enforce laws. That's their job, right? Law enforcement. Yes, we do know that we're going to stretch that, because I'll tell you, I'm very public about it too. The best job about the police and the narrative and the aftermath of writing the report is you take the evidence and you fit that narrative to your report, right? So it sticks better. But that's such a rarity in the instance of what really happens. Like I keep saying, if we go back to that one statistics, because everyone likes to throw that out there. Well, you got 10 black guys were stopped and they were searched. You got 10 white guys, 2 were searched. Well, maybe the 10 black guys didn't know they could look at the cop and say, no, you don't have permission to search my car. And maybe the white guys, they actually said, no, sorry, you can't search my car.
Well, the problem with your assessment, and Izzo, I hate to interrupt, man, but we got to have a discussion about it. The problem with your assessment is that you're not taking into account the fact that the data I just read to you also showed that even though blacks were less likely to have any weapons, any contraband, or any drugs, they were still more likely to be targeted and searched than whites. Meaning, if you're talking about a pure law enforcement standpoint, whites are more likely to get away with crimes because they are the ones less likely to be targeted by police officers. As I said before, brother, my only beef with you is the fact that you can call out the prosecutor, biased judges, the prison industrial complex, but you have this blind spot as it relates to police officers who are the first agents who administer justice in that entire equation that you laid out. How can they not be part of the systemic bias, but every other level of the criminal justice system is part of the systemic bias that you oppose?
Is it safe to say that the police officers are going to be the ones who have the first contact with the subjects on the street?
No, it's sick to say that they're not also subject to the same biases that any other level of criminal justice is subject to.
Well, let's back up for a second. The police officers are going to be the first one to have contact with the people on the street. And a lot of times, if you work in the same neighborhood for 10, 15, 20 years, you know the same people who are regulars, you know the problems. So there are going to be instances where you do know that you arrested John Doe, who's a black male, 5 times walking down the street because he had something illegal in him. It's probably a safe bet that if you wind up contacting him, searching him, and asking for permission to search, he's going to have something on him again for the 10th time.
Come on, man, that's a ridiculous assessment. You're using a microcosm to explain a macrocosm.
How many
policing in the United States of America?
How many years were you a police officer?
Well, let me talk about your years
were you a police officer?
Let me talk about, no, man, I'm not the popo, brother.
Or you
so let me talk about your years as a cop.
My expertise as the
let's talk about your years as a cop. You were there for 16 years and you admitted that you arrested people for dumb stuff, correct?
Absolutely, in my opinion, yes. Some of the stuff like
so you were a perpetrator of an antithetical reality for law enforcement. You were not the guy administering justice, you were administering arrests, correct?
Documenting behavior and actions, correct.
Okay, and you regret those actions today, I assume?
Personally, sure.
All right, 16 years you were a cop. In those 16 years, you're telling me that you never saw bias inside of law enforcement against people of color?
No, I never did, because we knew that we were under a microscope all the time. And I dealt with blacks, Hispanics, Asians, whites, you name it. It was not something that you saw anywhere. I'm sorry.
So you were a Chicago cop, but your own Chicago police.
I was a Northwest suburban cop. I was caught between Milwaukee and Chicago. So a lot of the element that they chased out, we got.
So in that same region, they have released data from 2016 to 2019 saying that cops on their police forces in that area targeted black and brown people. Are you saying that those cops or those executives
that actually says that they targeted, or is that what you're translating?
No, sir. It's in the 2016 Police Accountability Task Force report, and I'll send it to you after the show.
No, that's right. So
it's saying that they targeted black and brown people.
So police officers, they're saying that police officers admitted that they targeted black and brown people?
No, the data shows they targeted black and brown people.
Okay, so that's how you're translating it.
Well, the data shows that they targeted black and brown people. Those are facts.
That's how you're translating it, right? Is it a possibility that in that region that black and brown people committed more crimes than whites or Asians?
But that's according to the data. See, I'm glad you brought that up.
How are you translating the data?
Hold on, Izzo, that's possible, except for the fact that the data that actually has codified their criminal history background says no, they did not commit more criminality than white people. They were not found to have more contraband. They were found to have less contraband, and they were found to have less weapons. They were found to have less drugs. That's what the study says.
What crimes are we comparing in that study?
We're comparing contraband, drugs.
Okay, those are not going to be initial context. Those are going to be a result of the stop. What is the reason that the police officer stopped them for in the first place?
Well, according to the study, they targeted it. Now, Izzo, I get it, brother. You represent law enforcement.
You gotta explain that.
Let me say this to you, man, because I get what you're trying to do.
Irresponsible and leave your audience out there.
But think about how logical this sounds.
Contact with the first place.
Izzo, think about how logical this sounds. Just give me a moment, man. Give me a moment.
Please do.
You believe that judges engage in systemic racism against black people? Yes or no?
I do. Yes, I do.
You believe that sheriffs or jails and prisons engage in systemic bias against black and brown people?
No, the operators of, not the correctional officers.
Okay, but the system itself.
Yeah, the system. I said it the last time too, is you have a housing facility that's going to need, if you're a vendor of shirts and uniforms and food, you're going to need those vendor supplies utilized. So you have to have bodies in the jail. I keep saying that the laws that are on the books are easily designed to wind up keeping the black people in prison.
You believe prosecutors, who could also argue that they're simply following the law, you believe prosecutors are also part of systemic racism against black and brown people, correct?
You not pay attention to Kim Fox in the Chicago area?
Brother, that's a yes or a no. Do you believe that or not?
I believe that there's something abhorrently wrong with the prosecutorial system.
And you believe everything is righteous with the police officers in the process of criminal justice?
I believe for the most part, 100%.
Okay.
Didn't come back.
Listen, I'm going to let your point stand, brother. It's silly as hell to me that you have that blind spot because you seem to be a smarter guy than that.
You talk a lot, but you don't let me get too much out, do you?
Well, you got enough out, man. I just wanted to make sure I made that point clear.
I still want to know where the whites versus the blacks are coming in, what their initial stops are, because you can't say.
Yeah, I'll send you the data, brother.
But you can't expect anyone else.
You have your point. You have your point of view on that.
I'm going to
move on. I don't have a few minutes, brother.
Drugs.
Okay, that's fine. We got a few minutes.
Go ahead.
Let me read something because I found this really interesting and I want to hit all these points. Your bio says, and this is what you represent to people. Your bio says, it is Izzo's goal to bridge the gap between the police and the public through education, empowerment, and respect. Do you stand by that in your bio?
Certainly do.
Okay, let me read something to you. I'll read two things to you. I want you to remember the respect part. You tweeted, I'm for starting a movement of torching the F out of all BLM Black Lives Matter flag. But that would be a waste of money. So instead, I just ordered my first Black Lives Matter flag and will be vlogging and documenting when I use it to pick up my dog's ish each time he goes. Makes me wish I had a horse now.
100%.
Now, once again, your bio says your goal is to bridge the gap between the police and the public through education, empowerment, and respect. Do you find that comment to be respectful?
No, there's no respect for Black Lives Matter in that. I don't respect Black Lives Matter.
Now, do you believe that members of Black Lives Matter are American citizens?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe that members of QAnon are American citizens, a group you used to be a member of?
I was never a member of them, but yes, I do.
Okay. Have you said anything as grotesque against members of QAnon?
I'm sure I have. You'd have to dig back in my social media.
Well, tell me.
Tell you what I have said?
About QAnon.
Well, I can't recall off the bat. You'd have to go through my social media as thorough as you did to find that selective statement.
Okay. Let me go through another one then. Why you asked? You said that the Black National Anthem is racist and offensive.
Yeah, 100%.
Let me finish the quote. If I ever hear it in public, I'm going to return the favor and talk loudly over it like some folk do in movie theaters.
100%.
Okay? What's racist about the Black National Anthem, lift every voice and sing? What's racist about it?
What do we need segregation for? I thought the black community was against segregation.
What's racist, sir, about the song?
Segregation is racist. Segregation is racist.
The author,
Doc,
segregation, first of all,
is this a dialogue or is this a monologue? Is this a monologue or dialogue?
Sure it is. But answer the question, what's racist about the song itself?
Segregation. It's segregation. You are segregating a people. But again, too, that's what liberal whites and liberal black loves to do. They love to wind up keeping people separate, and they wind up furthering their own agenda. If you can't see the difference or the issue with, instead of uniting a people, but we have to have division, you're by definition putting your voices above other people.
Do you understand? Let me explain to you, brother, because I think you can get this. The national anthem that was adopted, I think, in 1931 fully, written in 1814. The national anthem actually has elements of racism inside of the lyrics.
I'm sure, Doc, if you found everything, if you searched everything, you would find something that would offend somebody. If we're going to take our time,
but Izzo, that's the real point.
If we're going to spend another generation taking down every movie and statue and cancel.
But nobody's taking down the national anthem. It's a great thing that black people have a song that they can be proud of as well, rather than singing a song that's racist against black people.
Why shouldn't collectively all come together and then edit it and take a vote from whites, blacks, Hispanics, all Americans to find out what they think is racist? See, the problem with the black community and the liberals, the liberal whites who fuel the black community is there is this unfortunate settling of nonstop repetitive victimhood. There is nothing that's ever going to be good enough so that people can wind up moving forward. And it's a brilliant tactic. It's a brilliant tactic to wind up keeping people always on edge, always defensive, always segregated. So we always have a problem that you liberals can come in and say, oh, we have the answer to fix it. See, we haven't had a conversation here today.
Izzo, let's do this on the other side of the break. Okay, on the other side of the break, I want to talk about what you call victimhood, and we're going to talk about reparations. I went over some rant that you did. It's like a 4-minute rant. You were anti-reparations, and that's fine. That's your position. That's your argument. We got to go to a break. On the other side of the break, let's talk about the victimhood that you talk of, and let's contextualize that victimhood and see who the government has actually given more handouts to throughout the history of this nation. All right, we got more on the other side. All right, I got Dominick Izzo, 16-year police veteran, retired. He did this rant, man, where like he was really upset about reparations. And so I wanted to ask him, why is he so upset about descendants of slaves receiving reparations? Brother Izzo, let me ask you this specific question. Are you against the idea of reparations holistically, or are you against the idea of reparations as it relates to descendants of slaves?
Emotionally, I'm against the idea of handouts. That's that. But do I think that if there was a proper way done, I'm not going to have an issue with it, and I'll explain why, if you let me explain, Doc. I'm going to give you an example. Like we're here in Evanston, Illinois, which is not that far from where I live. They're going to be the first area of giving out reparations. And I'm paraphrasing everything. They're looking at giving the members of the black community $25,000 for home repairs. A couple of my questions are, now I'm going to go back to the emotional side. The emotional side of, I'm in Cook County, does that come out of my pocket? Because I'm 3rd generation Italian here. I had nothing to do with the horrific nature of what slavery did and how horribly the black community was treated. That's the emotional side. The other side of it, the issue is where does that money really go? Because if we're going to look at $25,000, I don't know who's thinking about this. Where's it coming from? Number one, is it state or federal? Number two, if it's going into home repairs, that's you technically never own your own home. That's going to increase the property value of homes in Evanston, which is going to raise the prices of their homes, and they're going to have the ability to raise home taxes. So in the end, are they really giving reparations to the black community, or are they just the city of Evanston just raising property value so they could tax more and then pumping it back into their city? So when you have issues like that, that's why I think reparations is such an extremely messy aspect. And I think it's such divisive when it's only put out there as we have to put this in the descendants of slaves, and they leave that it's like a dangling participle. You leave it out there and no one's explaining how it's done. I am very open. I will always come at something with an emotional point of view, but if you could put on paper something that makes sense to me about taking care of, I mean, if we had people from the South who still today had land that was involved in slavery, and though that generational wealth specifically was taken and given to the families, I wouldn't have a problem for that. But again, in totality, I have a problem with tax dollars being utilized for one group who we're hundreds of years later, and I don't know how many people are affected by slavery in today's day and age. That is my ultimate opinion on it.
Let's talk about that. April 16th, 1862, something quite remarkable happened. Lincoln signed something called the compensated emancipation. You ever heard of that before?
I believe I read it once, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with it.
Literally, after slaves were free, the American government gave reparations to slave masters, gave them $300 and said, you know, because we have taken away your ability to own a black person, we are going to, in fact, give you reparations because we feel, the American government feels that we have economically disadvantaged you. So now you can actually apply for reparations under the Compensated Emancipation Act. They got reparations. The black people who were Freed got absolutely nothing, not even land.
To clarify, slave owners got reparations, correct?
Slave owners got reparations.
Does that include
April 16th,
does that
1862?
Does that include the 3,000 black slave owners that were in America too? Did they get reparations?
Well, they may have, but once again, we're talking about a system issue. That doesn't change the reality that slave owners had a way to obtain reparations from the American government based on the law that was signed, passed by Congress and signed into law by the president.
If we keep going back to the reflect the past,
Izzo, brother, I allowed you to get all your points out, brother.
But you know what? You know what you guys keep doing? You guys keep sitting there.
Izzo,
it's like
I allowed you to get all of your points out. I did. Okay.
If we keep reflecting forward.
1862, reparations was a reality for those that owned slaves and no longer could own them. In 1942, the Japanese received reparations because of during World War II and the internment camps. You know about that. They received reparations. How did that reparations work? 1948, Congress passed a reparation fund of $38 million and then awarded each survivor $20,000. In 1990, 80,000 people claimed it, which took the fund to $1.6 billion. The reason they did this is because the American government said, we broke something and we're going to repair it. Now, what I did not hear white people like yourself saying, wait a minute, I had nothing to do with that war. Why am I paying for it? And also, while we're talking about, is it your money? Hell no, it's not your money. And let me tell you why it's not your money. The American government admits twice that what they did by protecting slavery, endorsing slavery, and promoting slavery was an injustice to black families in the United States. They have admitted that twice on the record. Reparations simply means government repair. That's all that means. So if you admit that a wrong took place that economically disadvantaged other groups, such as slave owners, they got reparations. The Japanese, they got reparations. The American government, Izzo, is actually for reparations based on history. But all of a sudden, you want to argue about the chips, brother, of if this is coming out of your pocket. I'm a taxpayer too. It'll be coming out of my pocket as well. And also,
we have two solutions, Doc. We have two solutions: either pass it and just get it over with. But then again, too, no one will be happy. And 100 years from now, people will still be bitching and complaining about stuff. Or you wind up just finding a proper solution. Either way, no one will ever be happy with anything. It is 2021. And, I think every culture in this country has suffered at the hands of it. America was not built on tickles and feathers. It was built on broken backs and bloodied bodies. And it's a shame that it got to be that way. But Irish, Chinese with the railroads, Italians, everybody suffered. And we're not gonna downplay. We will not downplay the suffering of the black community. They 100% suffered. And they're still suffering today in Democrat cities. They're still suffering worse than anybody in Democrat cities.
So you're making it a partisan issue, Izzo. And if you want to go partisan,
100% issue partisan.
Okay, well let's go partisan then. You want to go there, Izzo?
100 years Democrat.
Izzo, let's go there. All right, I respond to that. 7 out of the 8 poorest states in the United States of America are Republican states. 6 out of the 7 worst states performing academically are Republican states.
What's the percentage of the black community?
Are you trying to say black people are inherently dumb?
No, no, that's your words. Don't you dare.
Brother, I'm trying to figure out what's the correlation. Wait a minute.
Like that.
What's the correlation?
You're an educated
don't disrespect me. What's the correlation between a black population and the Republican states?
And the culture who is doing the complaining about not getting reparations. So if you're going to talk about the Republican states that are sitting there and they're poor, do you have a group of white people who are complaining about reparations? You're asking me about reparations, specifically to the black community.
What was your question? What was the point of your question about these states and black populations? And the bottom line is these states have a majority white population. But why is that a question as it relates to low academic performance?
Because you're talking. Who said academic performance? I said.
I did. I said 6 out of the 7 states that have the worst academic performance are Republican states. Georgia is one of them.
Chicago's got an average of 67% graduation rate for male blacks. So I'm sorry, is that a Democrat or Republican-run city?
Yeah, listen, brother. You won't find. Hold on, listen to me, because I'm an educator. I'm a college professor. I have no love. I have no love for Democrats or Republicans who can't figure out how to make sure our K through 12 educational system works. So you got to take that argument somewhere else. I'm the guy that'll put my foot in, no matter what party affiliation you belong to.
You're the one who brought up education. You're the one who brought up education.
I did, because you, sir, I brought up education because you brought up a partisan conversation about these various cities.
I didn't know that poverty meant you were stupid.
No, it doesn't. But you brought up the question in a weird way.
You're the one who said, you're saying black people are dumb?
Yeah. You made the question, brother. I just wanted you to clarify why. We got 1 minute left. Izzo, do you agree with the reparations that have already been paid out to Native Americans, Japanese slave owners? Do you agree the American government should have done that?
I don't know what the context was, so I have no opinion.
Okay. Now, do you think that because of slavery in the United States of America and what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, that because of slavery, you have thingnified black people, made them a means to an end, and because of the disparities that existed from slavery and the lack of enterprising and opportunity for land grants, et cetera, it economically disadvantaged families, our ancestors. Do you not believe that is a reality in this country? That slavery disadvantaged black families? I've
said it before. All you have to do is go south of 290 in Chicago and you'll see exactly why the black families were destroyed with no opportunity for economic growth. Once again, that's a Democrat problem.
No, man, it's an American problem. And all of this
show me another city.
It's an American problem.
I don't disagree with you on that because we're all on my check.
All right, we'll agree on that. Brother, it's been real, man. I appreciate your time, all right?
Thanks, Doc. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, thank you. Thanks.